I never got to play with Legos as a kid, and I'm gonna pretend that's why I never did anything with my life, but that's all about to change with the KBD Craft Lilith. If you don't know, the KBD Craft boards are 60% keyboards built out of plastic bricks. They're very specifically called bricks and not Legos, even though they function exactly the same. It started with the Atom, and they just released the Lilith, the newer, better version, since this one is at an angle instead of being flat like the Atom. As you can see, everything you need to build the keyboard comes in this little cardboard box, though what you get depends on what kit you bought. I got the full kit, so this box is pretty full, though I don't know how big the box of the base kit is. This one includes a ton of keycaps, stabilizers, a couple of brick-built characters that I don't think they have the license to use, a coiled cable that we'll take a look at later, and some pre-loop switches, some foam pads that were an extra $5, and the keyboard itself that comes unassembled in bags. I don't know why they didn't put it all in one bag and why the base is 2 separate pieces instead of one, but I'm going to assume it's to make the box smaller. If they did have to split it in half though, I wish they did it in the center instead of at the right. You of course get the build instructions for everything, so even a child shouldn't have trouble building this. For some reason the PCB comes in this manila envelope. That was kind of off-putting, but it works, so it shouldn't be an issue. These are your gaskets, JST cable, completely unbranded switch and keycap holder, and rubber feet. You also get a nice layer of foam that you don't have to pay anything extra for, and a very flexible plate. They don't specify what kind of material it is on the website, but I'm going to assume it's palm. This also came with my board outside of the box, but I'll talk more about that later in detail. And without further ado, let's start building the Lilith. The instructions have you start with the stabilizers, and I'm not sure what kind of stabilizers these are, but I don't like them. The front of the box calls them Stabby JKW, but the back of the box says that they're ultra silent technology from JWK, so I'm not sure which one it is. The instructions for lubing the stabs is kind of weird because it tells you to lube them with the included grease, and if there's one thing I don't have, it's that. But it also says that if you get the 05002, it's easier because it's pre-lubed. And this does have a layer of something on it, but I'm gonna re-lube it anyways. Once we've got all the stabs clipped into the plate, we can remove all the cutout squares from the pour-on foam and place it all on the PCB to create what the instructions call the Core 64 sandwich. As for the switches, these are the S2 engine switches. They're pre-lubed and have a double-stage spring. Take a listen. Finally, we get to move on to actually building the bricks that aren't Legos. To start, we take the biggest and the second largest piece and place them side by side. And then we just place the bricks on top of them as shown in the instructions. Easy. Well, apparently I'm too dumb to play with Legos because I spent a good 10 minutes trying to figure out why I couldn't get them to fit like they were in the picture. It turns out I put a 2x6 piece in place of a 2x8 piece, and the real reason I haven't done anything with my life is because I do things like this. But after I decided to organize everything, it was time to start over and actually build this thing. Once the first couple layers are done, it's time to put on the gaskets. The top ones are actually sitting higher than the bottom, and that's what gives this keyboard the 5.5 degree typing angle. After that, we fit in the orange parts, which are for holding your brick people, and then we could put in the PCB. I bought the extra foams though, so those need to go on the bottom of the case first. This is a very soft foam, and I think I'm gonna keep the extra circle bits to stuff inside another keyboard in the future. Now that that's done, we can put the PCB in place and build the final layer of bricks. After making sure that they're all nice and tight, we can put on the rubber feet. Unfortunately, there is no cutout for them, so if you're OCD about things being perfectly in place, this might be your worst nightmare. And with that, we are done building the keyboard. I have absolutely no idea what this JST cable is for though, none of the instructions mentioned it, and the keyboard itself works just fine without it, so I'm gonna assume that I don't need it. If you do know what it is though, please let me know in the comments. But finishing the keyboard doesn't mean we're done building in general. You may remember that this kit also came with 2 characters that you can build with blocks, and this is the first one. Just in case KBD doesn't have the rights to use this, I'm gonna call them Slenderman. Slenderman is big and long and carries a box. Very scary. Up next is Slenderman's friend. We'll call him Mr. Jobs. Mr. Jobs is a lot more like what I would expect from a LEGO character, and I had a lot more fun building him. But since we have to remember that I'm too dumb to play with Legos, I couldn't figure out what this piece was for and gave up on it. Turns out it's a helmet and that goes on his head, but it's ugly, so I left it off. And finally, for the extra package that came outside of the box, this is actually a stand to display your keyboard. I don't have a shelf and my keyboards just sit wherever I can find space for them, so this is kind of useless to me. But it was free if you bought the keyboard before a certain date, so I decided to build it anyways. As far as its function as a stand goes though, I don't like it. It's got a lot of wobble and it makes the keyboard stand straight up instead of at an angle, so it's not something that I would pay money for. Now if you want your Slenderman and Mr. Jobs to stand on your keyboard, you just have to snap these orange things in, and that lets you put whatever characters you want on the side of your board. The best part is that these freely rotate, so you can put them in the best position for both filming and typing. Speaking of typing though, let's finally do some. So what did you think about the keyboard? Personally, I think it sounds a bit weak and boring, and it doesn't feel particularly special either. But that's not really why you're buying this keyboard, is it? If you're specifically looking for a keyboard that allows you to put Legos on it, then there's really no other option, and as far as that goes, this isn't a bad one. If you do decide to pick this up though, you might want to consider the base kit instead. You'll save $30 to use on better keycaps and switches. For a pre-loop switch, the S2s aren't very smooth, and while the keycaps are double shot, they feel very cheap. I do apologize if you could tell this video was a bit rushed and poorly edited, by the way. My monitor stopped working 2 weeks ago, and since then my computer has also been on the fritz. It crashed 4 times while editing, and I had to restart editing twice. Like, from scratch. I wasn't even sure if I'd finished this video on time, but if you're watching this, then I'm assuming that I did. Because of all that though, I've decided to temporarily save up for new hardware instead of splurging all my money on keyboards. Luckily, Black Friday is just around the corner, and if you'd like to help me pay for that stuff, I've set up a Ko-Fi. You can find that in the description. But even if you don't, I want to say thanks for watching all the way to the end. It really helps with the YouTube algorithm, as does liking and subscribing. Hopefully my next video will be a lot better because I won't be working on crappy hardware, and until then, I will see you next time.